We kind of talked about the offensive line, and we talked about your thoughts on it just now. I think my best takeaway from what you just said is that it will be a longer process, and I can only kind of look at what other teams have done. And one of the facets of New England's team that I really found to be just truly astounding when I really looked at the New England Patriots, I thought to myself, right before the Super Bowl, I thought, who is on their offensive line? When did they get them? How did they get them? Where did they come from? And we don't really look at that. We only really see that, I would say, in the introduction of a game on a graphic on CBS Sports when they say, hi, I'm, let's just say Mike McGlinchey, offensive tackle, Notre Dame, or, you don't really look at those things. And New England's offensive line, from what I looked at, the oldest gentleman on the line was 30 years old, and outside of that, the oldest guy was 26. So they actually have drafted, in terms of their starting linemen, they've drafted starting linemen between, the second and fifth round that ended up being starters on that line in the Super Bowl protecting Tom Brady. So that's a very interesting dynamic. I'm not saying that Buffalo is going to be able to do the same thing as New England, but that's pretty interesting to say the least.
There's a couple things I think you can take from that, and one, I think it speaks to their scheme fit and who's the right fit for them versus who's just the top-end talent. You also have to remember they did spend their first-round pick last year on an offensive lineman who would have been the starter if he didn't get hurt. But the biggest luxury, they have Dante Scarnecchia, who's probably the best offensive line coach in history. So
he's been there for like 50 years.
Yeah. As him, so being able to kind of put that together, he can mold that into what's there, and I hope Bobby Johnson turns into that, but it's unfair to expect that in year one. But that's why I said earlier, I think the offensive line is 50-50. It's half talent, half the gelling and continuity and consolidation together of how you play and know each other. So I think that's something important to take from there, is that they really built that up together. And I actually think if you look at the Patriots offensive line weeks 1 through 6 versus what they look like at the end of the season through the playoff run, they really changed a lot as the year went. And that shows the importance of sticking together, having a good run of health, and being able to have the same guys work together. So one bonus is, I think, with that first round pick, Isaiah Wynn coming back, I doubt that they signed Trent Brown, and that might be a free agent that the Bills go after.
Right.
To be able to maybe snag someone there.
You just took the words out of my mouth. That's one of the few, probably on my short list as far as a top 3 free agent that I would like Buffalo to go get. That guy is ranked in the top.
He's a monster. Like, he's just so enormous. It's crazy. Like 6'8", 360, and I think he genuinely plays at 360. And that, like, he's a moderately good athlete. Like, he's not actually phenomenal, but he's quick enough that he's just so big and long, it's hard to get around him. And he just uses it to his advantage. And, I know a lot of fans will immediately say, "Oh no, don't sign any offensive line or any guys from the Patriots because they make them look better than what they are, and then they fail when they go elsewhere." And don't get me wrong, there's some of that they get a little special sauce when they're there. But I think that the technique that he learned from Scarnecchia, I don't think he all of a sudden is just going to lose, and that's going to just go away, and he doesn't know how to play with that leverage or with that technique anymore. I think that's stuff he can bring with, and no matter what, he's not going to stop being 6'8", 360.
Well, every situation's different, too. Like, and I've heard Bills fans say that, too. I'm glad you brought that up. They say, oh, don't go get Patriots players because they don't do as well here as they did there. Look at anytime Buffalo has brought in a former Patriot, Drew Bledsoe was somewhat not in his prime. He was kind of at the end of his prime. Lawyer Malloy was kind of at the end of his prime. There's been guys that we've received from New England, whether with free agency or trade, that were not in their prime. This guy is in his prime. He is going to be in his prime for a long time, based on his age and based on his performance. So I would love to have this guy. I think it would be a great addition. And you mentioned something that I've kind of talked about as well on the podcast a few times, as far as Buffalo's offensive line, is with Deion Dawkins and whether or not he's a true left tackle or more of a guard. I saw him in the draft as more of a guard, and he's been a tackle here ever since. Do you see them possibly moving him at some point, depending on who they get at left or right tackle?
We talked earlier, this is another topic that's been a really hotly debated topic in the Cover One Premium channel. I think that offensive tackle in the NFL is harder than offensive guard. So I think that virtually every player you can say, I think it's kind of a throwaway comment that you hear from evaluators when they want to hedge or kind of have a cop-out and they're not sure how to evaluate a guy, and they say, hey, he might be better at guard. Well, yeah, no duh. Almost every player is better at guard. Offensive tackle is harder. Right. So I think that, yes, that's easy to say. And there's a couple guys who are the really tall, lean, thin tackles that maybe couldn't work at guard. But just about everybody else, they'd be a better guard. So I think Deion Dawkins is one of those guys. I think Deion Dawkins is almost the prototype of the mauler, powerful guard who can just beat you up. I also think he's capable of playing offensive tackle in the NFL. So if we move Deion Dawkins to guard, it's because we acquired two really good tackles. Because you can't move him into guard without better option at tackle. Right. You have to have an upgrade or a better option there. So if we do, it is an awesome luxury. And that means that our offseason went really, really well. I don't anticipate, in my mind, that would be that we signed Darrell Williams and drafted Jonah Williams. We would need to do both of those things, or sign Trent Brown and drafted Juwan Taylor. It would take two moves like that of the very upper echelon first-round pick tackle and the $12 million a year free agent offensive tackle. And if we got both of them, which is not impossible but maybe isn't likely, if we got both of them, that would be awesome, because I think Deion Dawkins would be just a phenomenal left guard who would dominate. And I think that would be great for him, and everyone would look good. So it's something that I think is possible, but I'm going to say it's unlikely because we won't have the luxury of having someone better at left tackle than Dawkins.
Right. That's kind of the point that I made on my podcast and in my last article. I thought of, some late round flyers. There's a guy from Oklahoma by the name of Bobby Evans that's shown some decent things. He's pretty raw, but he's somebody that I think in a couple years, 2-3 years, he could be really good. But another prospect that is very polarizing in this draft, I think he's one of the more, if this makes sense, underrated polarizing prospect. You don't know what to say or what to expect from him. But Greg Little, what are your thoughts on Greg Little? Do you like him? Are you up in the air? What are you thinking?
We talked to Christian Page last night on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, and I told him I literally haven't met someone yet who likes Greg Little. Not one. I have not found a single evaluator or scout. Every single one has this weird obligation, like, well, you have to rate him in the top 30 or 45 or 20 or whatever their list is, but I don't really like him. I'm like, well, then who does like? It's so crazy. So I think he's a guy who checks a lot of physical boxes. I think he's the right size. I think he's the right length. I think he's a good athlete. I think that he has the potential to be a good player. He just hasn't put it together, and he doesn't seem to have a great work ethic and doesn't seem to have a great dedication or love of football, which tells me I don't have to worry about it because there's never going to be a guy like that drafted by Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane.
Right.
So I'm not all that concerned about it because there's literally almost no possibility that they draft that guy because that's not the kind of – they don't take – guys who check the skill boxes, but you're going to have to get them to try hard and work hard and love football. That's just not their MO. They're not going to pick that kind of guy. So my guess is that someone else is going to reach on him, and if he falls far enough, he'll be a good value. but I just know an awful lot of people who, when they ask, "Hey, who's your biggest bust at offensive tackle?" he's pretty unanimous.
It's very funny because I do a lot of the mock draft simulators. A good buddy of mine, Joe Marino, who I'm sure you've talked to on Twitter. He's got the draftnetwork.com. Shout out to him. That platform is pretty awesome as well. I'm all about promoting others. That's what this podcast is about, too. Outside of promoting myself, promote individuals like yourself and promote others. But anywho, the draftnetwork.com, I did a mock draft, and I did like 7 Buffalo Bills mock drafts in a row, and Greg Little was available in every single one, to the point where he went from the second round to the third round, and other mocks he was drafted in late in the first round. There is no, like you said, he is one of the biggest anomalies, I'd say, in this draft. There's no analyst that or writer or podcast guy, whatever you want to, sports guy that can come out and say Greg Little is for sure a top, tackle in this draft. It just doesn't exist.
It's so funny. I might actually go out of my way to find that guy. Like, I might just start searching on Twitter, and I'll just go in and search. I'm going to find someone who loves Greg Little, and I'm going to call him and interview that guy. It's funny the way that works. Is that, like I said, there are certain things that, whether it's some of the off-field issues, locker room fit, things like that, that I think that a lot of times fans and media members go a little bit too far in if there's any red flag about anything, that he's not going to be a fit for the process, and McDermott's not going to go after him, and that I don't think that's quite fair. They're not looking for choir boys. Trent Murphy had a PED suspension. We have guys who had some bumps in their past, but they're always going to have a phenomenal work ethic, and they're always going to be just infatuated with loving football and being totally all bought in. And guys who don't check those 2 boxes, I think, are never going to be a fit.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And it's definitely evident when Brandon Beane steps up to a podium and Sean McDermott steps up to a podium, and they both say, we're looking for winning mentalities. We're looking for culture over talent. We're looking to build this team full of winning personalities that want to be here, want to win. I can't tell you how many years that I've watched this team bring in players that I know, that I deep down in my heart, it takes me one interview of watching that player talk to a reporter, and I know right away that guy just simply does not want to be here. I hate to say that because I love this community so much. I love the fans. I love Bills Mafia. I love everything about it. The Bills fans, the Bills regimes, whether it's Brandon Beane or Sean McDermott or any regime in the future, if there is another one in the next 20 years, I hope that they take note of Beane and McDermott saying, we're going to bring in players that want to be here, because that's an art that is just kind of lost in the National Football League, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. And I think that last year, going into the draft, we were adamant that it was going to be Harrison Phillips, that Harrison Phillips checked every single box, and that I would be shocked if that guy doesn't end up being a Buffalo Bill. And a lot of it came out today. That guy this year is Dalton Reisner. He's a tackle / guard / center who's played all 3 positions at Kansas State. He checks every single box. He is just so many of the things that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane look for that I'll almost be surprised if he doesn't somehow end up being a Buffalo Bill. So if his stock rises to where he ends up being a late first-round pick, it is what it is. But if that guy's available there in our second-round pick, or, again, I'm a huge proponent of team trade down here. I'd love to trade back and pick up an extra second-round pick. I think I'd be shocked if Dalton Reisner doesn't end up being one of those guys.
One of the funniest kind of interactions that I recently saw was you talking with Nate Geary, and you were talking about trading down, and you did hashtag team trade down. Then I hashtagged team trade down. If they don't trade down, I would be so surprised. I would really, truly, I'd be so surprised that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott see one particular player as that end all be all guy at 9th overall that they have to take, because I think there's a very select group of guys that they would take 9th overall if they do fall. And as you alluded to that yourself earlier with Williams or Taylor, one of those guys falls to 9, they might go offensive lineman first round, but the difference between a tackle like Williams and Taylor compared to Risner, what would you say are the differences as far as skill level, as far as pros and cons, or is it just simply that those two guys are just all around better than Risner?
I think that, I think there is a second tier a little bit. So I do think there are 4 or 5 guys that if they fall, the Bills will just